Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I have Esmeralda Lira here.
Thank you.
She's a real estate investor and broker here in Austin, Texas. We had some really exciting stuff that we were talking about and want to continue on to what we were talking about before, which is, your first deal, how you really got involved into the industry, how you really started off, how little it actually takes.
That's right.
And then, I think what would be good is to go in and sort of discuss some of the marketing tactics, so door flyers, handwritten notes versus non-handwritten notes, all of those things. I mean, do you have an opinion on, so just to recap, she was able to get her first deal by going around different neighborhoods and just putting little notes on people's house, and someone finally called you. You were able to get a deal done. You made your first $5,000 in profit, which is awesome.
I think it's good.
I think it's huge, yeah, especially if you're starting out. And so then take me from there, sort of what happened and what some of the opinions you have on, with the marketing.
Okay. Well, with every deal, you learn a lot because
Okay.
every deal is different from the next. I tell people all the time, there's no deal that is the same in real estate.
Okay.
Everything's different. So every experience does matter.
Okay.
So you have to go out there and experience it for yourself because it's the details that matter. Okay. So in that deal, for example, what I learned on that deal is I was trying to market that house on the wrong side of town because this is where I live. So that house was in another part of Austin, which is southeast Austin, and I was trying to grab a buyer from this side of town. What I learned from that is that buyers on this side of town didn't want to live on that side of town. So the way I found that buyer was I started marketing the house on that side of town around that neighborhood, because the people who buy it are people who are in that neighborhood, from friends to family. They can come and visit their family, and if they're around that neighborhood, then they like that neighborhood. They feel comfortable in that neighborhood. So I learned that from that. If you have a house over there, market it over there. So we found a buyer within 2 weeks once the signs went up.
Right.
And every house has to be marketed differently depending on what it has to offer. Okay, that's another thing that you learn. That house was found from a friend that lived in the neighborhood, and we sold it within 2 weeks, and they had cash. So they had cash for the down payment.
Okay.
And that one, they just needed, let's say $10,000, and they had cash.
Is that important if they have cash versus situations where they don't have cash?
Well, I'm very creative.
Okay, good.
So in forms where they did not have cash, I would tell them to go sell something so that they can get the cash.
Okay.
So there's people who say, well, I don't have the money. Well, if you have something that you can sell, like
An
a mobile
asset.
home, like I got that a lot. Well, I have a mobile home. Well, that mobile home is worth money. Go sell that mobile home and then bring back the money for the down payment.
Okay.
So that's, we get around for that at that time. Now the laws have changed. Now there's something called the Dodd-Frank, and they want to know where the money came from.
What is
and
that?
everything.
And how does that hinder?
Well, they want to know that they're able to afford the house with the
Okay.
monthly payments, and that they have bank statements and a job, and they're able to make those monthly payments, and they want to know exactly where that monthly payment's going to come from, and the down payment is coming from. Okay. But back then it was different. Okay. Back
It was
then,
just a
if somebody
free-for-all.
has $15,000-$20,000 and they have a job, then they would be able to buy a house.
Okay.
But now everything's different. They check everything, which is good. I think it's a good thing. It doesn't hinder anything. You just have to find a different way of doing things.
Okay. So have you noticed that can kill deals sometimes today? No?
No.
It's just you gotta be more creative.
You have to just be more creative, and you always ask more questions up front to see if they're
Okay.
able to afford that monthly payment.
So you would just said, what's your job? What's your monthly income?
Yeah, I always ask them a lot of questions and everything, and if they're good, then they're
Do
good.
people get weird about that?
About me asking questions? No, actually, with owner financing, it's completely different, because with owner financing, they expect you to ask questions.
Okay.
So I just had a call earlier, and I marketed with owner will finance, no banks needed, bad credit, okay. Because I'm the owner. So I'm okay with you having bad credit.
You don't care?
I don't care about you having bad credit. I want you to be able to afford the monthly payment. So because I want you to keep it forever. I'm not in the business to take the house back. I want them to stay 5, 10, 15 years until they refinance. But so I don't care about their credit, but I do care about their DTI, their debt to income ratio. So I want them to be able to make that monthly payment.
So explain to people that don't know DTI a little bit more.
Well, the DTI is called is your debt to income ratio, and that just basically means how much money do you make a month.
Okay.
Versus your debt, compared to your debt.
Okay.
So that's why it's called your debt to income ratio. So let's say somebody makes $4,000 a month, but they have $1,500 in debt, then they really only have $2,500 in purchasing power that month.
Okay.
So that's how the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac look at it. So that's how we have to look at it as investors.
And are they still like very dominant in this industry?
The investors?
No, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac.
Well, yes. Not in owner financing because we do our own loans, but
Right.
you still have to respect the rules of the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, because if you ever want the buyer to refinance, then you want to set them up to win.
Okay.
You don't want to set them up to lose because you want them to eventually refinance the house so that you can get your unearned equity from within the note.
So does that mean you still own the house, technically?
Technically, I'm the lien holder.
Okay.
I hold the note.
So
I don't own it I don't own the house anymore because the house does become the asset of the buyer. As long as they keep making payments, then I'm happy.
But if they don't,
if
you somehow are responsible again?
yes.
How?
That's one of the things that we can talk about that later.
Okay.
That's one of the disadvantages of taking over payments
Okay.
and then turning around and selling it is I like to be responsible investor. So if the buyer doesn't make payments, I'm going to make those payments.
Oh, okay.
And I will. I'll find a way to make those
Okay.
payments. And so that's another topic to talk about is that I believe real estate investors should be responsible with money so that if the buyer ever defaults, they can make those monthly payments until they resell it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and so that's what.
Yeah, because everything affects the person who was previously on the mortgage because their name stays on the mortgage
forever.
For as long as the buyer refinances.
Right.
It. Yeah. So I believe it's not good to not make the payments because if you don't make the payments, it affects the previous person and I don't want to do that. My word means a lot. So
Yeah, I think that's very important.
it is important. It's important to me. So
Okay.
be careful how many you buy because if something happens, then somebody has to make that payment, and if not, then you can get into other issues with problems. So.
Okay. So now let's fast forward. You started out your first deal, $5,000. Take me through sort of the next 15 years of.
Well, everything changed after that because after that we basically just kept doing assignments.
Okay.
So just getting them under contract, assigning it to the end buyer, getting them under contract, assigning it to the end buyer. And we did that for a while. The problem with that is it gets boring.
Okay.
And I am a very creative type of mind, so I started creating wraps after that. Wraps are basically playing with amortization schedules on the calculator. So I started going to, let's say for example, bankrate.com, and there's something called mortgage calculator. So then I started playing with the amortization schedules just like a bank.
Right.
Okay. Now that's a very powerful tool because you can see how much money you make or the bank makes off of someone borrowing a loan.
Okay.
So let's say you stay in a house for 30 years paying 6% interest. Over time, that interest can add up
So like what?
to a lot.
Like
to three
$100,000?
times the monthly mortgage, the mortgage,
Okay.
or two and a half
And
times.
so that's good for you. That's good for the bank.
That's good for the bank, and if you become the bank, that's good for you.
Okay. So if you, all right, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
then I
really
started
good.
playing with numbers, and then I started creating notes. And so instead of assigning those contracts, then I started creating the notes and jumping in the middle, I guess I should say.
Okay. And do you like that better? Is there more risk involved in that?
Well, there's a risk in the fact that if the buyer defaults, remember, then you'll have to take over payments and you have to make the payments because you're now in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Versus if you assign a contract, you kind of get out. You take your fee and you get out.
Okay. So
You're
it's
no
either
longer-
like a one-time take it and run,
Or you become the bank and you jump in the middle, you take responsibility, and then if the buyer defaults, then you take over. You make the payment.
so the risk is higher, but the reward is much, much
The
higher.
reward is much higher.
Much
and
higher?
And if you're, well, yeah, it depends on the deal.
Okay.
Yeah, depends on the deal. Sometimes you can make money up front with cash flow, and sometimes you make money on the unearned equity on the back end, and sometimes you make money on the down payment. So let's say the buyer brings $20,000 to the table, and there's $10,000 left over. Then you make that up front, and then you make your cash flow in the middle. You know, as they make those monthly payments. Let's say you raise the interest rate on them and wrap the note, and you're making $200 a month. Every month, and then at the back end, let's say there's $20,000 or $30,000 of unearned equity because you sold it at a higher sales price. Then you make money on the front end, the middle, and the back.
Okay, and
And that can add up.
Yeah, what does
You
that
add that
look like
up.
monthly? I mean, just as a scenario, not any specific but like something that someone could expect. So there's $200.
$200. Let's say there's, you know, you have a calculator. 250 times 12. There's one there.
250 times 12 is 3,000.
Okay, this is just for 1 year, and I
Okay.
always calculate 5 years.
5 years.
Okay,
so
and the reason why I calculate 5 years is with my experience, nobody refinances. Very few people ever refinance before 5 years.
Okay, so that's
they're going to stay in the
15,000.
house for at least a minimum of 5 years.
Okay,
So that's $3,000 times 5 is
that's 15,000.
that's 15,000. Okay, so that's just from the cash flow. From the front end, let's say you have, I don't know, let's say you have $10,000 left over
Okay,
after you pay closing costs and everything.
all
like
these
that.
other fees,
Okay.
and we can go into that later, right? Like
We
what
can
all
go
the other
into
fees
that
and stuff
later.
are. Okay,
Uh-huh.
go ahead.
So this is the front from the down payment. This is the middle, $15,000. And then at the end, on the back end, there's going to be, let's say there's $20,000 of under equity because you sold it for a higher sales price and there was a little bit of equity.
Okay.
So how much is that? You have 10, 15, and 20.
So that's $45,000.
Okay. So you're going to make $45,000 over time in 5 years.
In 5 years.
Yeah, and that's just a small one. I mean,
That's not
there's
profit, is it? Is
Yeah.
that profit?
Yeah.
That's profit.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's more than that here because it really depends on how long the seller was making payments on that house.
Okay.
So the one I'm doing today is they've been there for 10 years, so they're gone. They no longer can afford the house, or they just had to leave. So they
Okay.
left a mortgage in place with 20 years left on the note, but they
Okay.
made the payment for 10 years. So now, you know, you take over as the investor, you turn around and you sell it to a buyer. Well, how much is there's unearned equity on the back end here.
Okay.
Okay, so there's probably, every time this buyer makes a monthly payment, there's more money going towards the principal. So there's a gap there that is formed over time. So
Okay.
you may make $25,000 instead of the $20,000, but I use a very clear-cut number just to calculate real quickly. And so you'll probably make about 50 grand over time.
Over 5 years.
Over 5 years.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's just one deal. You know, it's
Really?
just a slow growth, you
Okay.
know, but if you can make enough money up front to get paid, you know, to continue being an investor,
Mhm.
and then your cash flow will come in every month, okay, and then your back end, when they refinance, you'll get that,
Okay.
or when they sell the house.
Right. So, how many do you think is appropriate to juggle? I mean, like when?
Well, here's the tough part.
Yeah.
The tough part is finding the deal.
Those deals.
Yes.
Or
So,
any deal.
well, depends on where you're at. If you're in Killeen,
Mhm.
I need to go to Killeen.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I heard about
Killeen
that.
Air
Yeah.
is they're everywhere.
Right.
So if I lived in Killeen, I'd be all over the place. Or maybe I need to form a team over there
Mhm.
because they're all over the place. But it's a different market, so I need to go drive it. I do like to drive my neighborhoods, which is another topic to talk about.
Okay.
Just because I like to know what I'm messing with, what I'm dealing with. Every market's different.
Mhm.
So if you were in Killeen, they'd be all over the place. If you're in Austin, it's tighter. It's a tight market here in Austin. You know, you don't find these that often.
Okay.
Because you can put a house on the market in Austin and they'd sell quickly, even if it was behind on payments.
Really?
Yeah, it's a good market.
We should talk about that next.
Yeah.
I think so.
Oh yeah.
All right. Make sure you guys stay tuned for the next one.